Alright, today let's work on something we haven't done before. We're going to take just a small block of wood. This is a way to get rid of those smaller scraps. I just kind of put them in there, and then I use the tailstock to hold them in place. And bring the tool rest up. And what we need to do is we need to round that out a little bit. So we can just take a wrapping gouge, kind of round it out. And then I use a Berdan to put a little bit of a tenon on the end. Then we can take it and turn it around now that we've got it somewhat built to where it'll be centered. We've got a small tenon on it, we can turn it around and get it centered in the chuck. We've got the shoulder that'll help hold it in. Tighten her in there good. I bring the tailstock back up just to start with while I'm working on this, getting it roughed out. And we don't need to be perfect, we just need to get some of it cleaned up. About like that. Now we can get rid of the tailstock. Then is what we need to do is come in and clean up the end. Now we can come in with our 1/4 inch detail gouge and clean the end of that off. About like that. Now I can come in with a Forstner bit, lock the tailstock in, slow the lathe down. Then we can drill in here a ways, and we're making the lid for the box. And we want to go in halfway deep. Let's see how deep we are there. Well, we're about that deep. We can go a little bit deeper than that. So let's lock him back in and go back in again. And we're about there. That looks pretty good. Alright, we can come in here and measure this and come out, and we know this is going to be the length of our lid. We can cut that down a ways. Come in with our detail gouge and kind of shape that lid. And since we're putting a long, snug fit lid on it, a lot of times I like to maybe put a little bit of a bead here at the top to make it a little bit easier to get a hold of. And I still got a rough spot on it. There we go, now I'm down smooth. So just a little bit of a hump to the top. We need to watch that our thickness is staying within the realm. And to about there. Now we can go ahead and sand that a little bit while we're here. And then we can part that off. We can just hold it with one hand as we part it with the other. Now we need to make the tenon for that, so we can just come in with a small Berdan and start cutting it down, checking it, kind of checking it as we go until we get it down to where we've got a nice snug fit. Then we need to make it a little bit longer. And we can test fit that lid. And it does fit on there nice and snug. So, we've got that done. Go back to our 1/4 inch detail gouge. And finish off the top. A little bit of sanding there again. And down the sides. And we're in pretty good shape there. Take the little of a smaller Forstner bit into the tailstock, bring it up, lock the tailstock in place. Now we need an actual toothpick that we can lay on that bit, and as we can see, we need to go almost about the full depth of that bit. And cut it up, turn it up, turn our lathe speed down, and as you can see, we've still got a slight lip here that will be the diameter of the inside of our box. Bring that out, clean our bit off. Go back in, lock it in. We're going to have to pull this out a few times, and I always like to hold on to the chuck when I pull it out, because I have had a chuck come loose on me, and it's not a good sign when the chuck comes loose with a bit in it, and it starts swinging around the lathe. I can tell you from experience that it's not something you want to do. In fact, I noticed this is the chuck that it happened on. We can show you that here in a minute. And there we are at about full depth. Now let's talk about this. I was using this drill bit in a vase and in this chuck. As you can see, when it flipped around, it did take a big gouge out of the chuck as it hit the lathe bed. The chuck went one way. It actually pulled the chuck off of the mortise taper. So the mortise taper stayed in the tailstock. The chuck stayed on the end of the drill bit. The drill bit bent, went around, hit the lathe bed, made this big ding in the side of the chuck, and of course ruined the drill bit. So that's why when I pull these out, I like to hang on to the chuck as I pull them out to make sure they don't come out of there. Alright, so we've got our depth set. We speed our lathe back up, come back in, check our depth, come to the outside, and that's about the depth of our toothpick holder now. We can cut that down a ways. And this is a good place to learn to use your, let's get the tool rest up. This is a good place to learn to use the skew because it's a long, nice taper. And we can just come across here like that with our skew, tapering that down. We can turn our skew around, come the other way. We're doing a little bit of a taper with a little bit larger in the center. So we're actually cutting downhill on our green, both directions here. And we're not quite rounded yet. We've still got a flat spot. So we need to make that a little bit smaller. Now we're getting down. Now let's get that final shape that we like. About there. Try to straighten that up a little bit. Come in with our sandpaper. Do some sanding on it. And now we're ready to cut that off. And we leave a little nub at the bottom, and I always just take the little carving tool and take that off. We can sand that bottom. Now as we see, our toothpicks will go in there. They're just a little bit proud, but our lid is a little bit deeper. And so there we go, we've got a toothpick holder.